Hi there, welcome to Boxing Deep Dive. I'm Lyndon Hosking, and it's great to have you along for another episode of Dream Fights. I'm going to bring in our co-hosts, Grant Tazzy Brown and Peter Maniatis. How are we, guys?
Good to be back, Lyndon.
It's great to, obviously we love these Dream Fights. I think we're all on a little bit of a high of our classic fight that we recorded this week with Jeff Fennick. I know I am. It was, how good was it? By the time this is obviously out, it'll be on YouTube and all the Spotify and everything else. But how good was it to have the man himself as part of Classic Fights?
It was awesome.
It was awesome.
Really good, mate.
And what I loved about it was he didn't hold back. He right out of the gates, he let loose. I think he might have been holding on to a little bit of that for a little while, I think. But great to have him on. And so if you haven't watched that, make sure it's available now on YouTube and Spotify. So watch it, listen to it. Don't miss it, because as I said, our special guest was the man himself, Jeff Fennick. Tazzy, sorry, go ahead, mate.
I've never known Jeff to hold back ever, mate, honestly.
I must admit I was a little bit surprised by, as I said, straight out the gates, cop this, I want this, I want that. Oh, look, it was just great. I mean, you could have been very politically correct and just say, oh, look, that's the way it goes. But we all obviously know Jeff well enough that that's not his style. And you ask a question and he'll tell you the answer with both barrels. So now we've got to tonight's fight. We'll get that to that in a sec. Let's just go to last week's poll for last week. It was, of course, Sugar Ray Leonard and Oscar De La Hoya. I think this was my fight. Let's just check the response here. 69% went for Sugar Ray Leonard over Oscar De La Hoya. So look, probably not a lot of surprise. But Peter, were you a little bit surprised there wasn't a little bit more love for Oscar?
Not really, no.
No. Okay.
No, Leonard's one of the greats. It's pretty hard. I mean, the guy beat Thomas Hitman Hearns at welterweight. So, yeah, not surprised at all. I think the legacy of Oscar De La Hoya, if he had beaten, say, Mayweather in that split decision, didn't lose those fights to Mosley and Trinidad, we probably would have looked at him a bit differently. And they were razor-thin decisions. It wasn't as if, they could all gone, his split decision can go either way, but it's just the way it is. So that's the way you get judged.
Tazzy,
lose a grand final by a point.
Yeah, well,
you've lost it by a point.
Tazzy, what do you reckon?
Yeah, besides De La Hoya's last fight against Manny, the only other decisive loss was to Hopkins, but he went up and fought the middleweight king, and he wasn't a middleweight Oscar. So apart from that, his losses were razor thin. They were the Mosley fights, the Trinidad fight. I still believe he won the Trinidad fight. Floyd. They're all close. Very close.
Yeah. Look, we had a couple of comments on I can't remember what was on social media or on YouTube, and a couple saying that right, so I'll get in focus there. Saying that he lost the fights to Mosley and the two fights, and he lost to Mayweather and he lost to Trinidad. But look, I think, like you said, Tazzy, the Trinidad loss was really close. The Mayweather loss was pretty close. I think one of the Mosley fights was really close as well, or they were both pretty close, one more so than the other.
Yeah, so the second Mosley fight, he was very unlucky.
Yeah.
I thought he was unlucky with the Trinidad fight still. I thought even though he won them last 3 rounds, still thought he was up. I still thought but I mean...
Yeah, I think it's just a little bit unfair. I was just going to say, Pete, I think it's a little bit unfair to say, well, he was gifted some decisions along his career because he was on the receiving end of a couple of really close losses as well. So I think that balanced out.
Sure.
I don't think he was gifted, mate.
No,
maybe Stern, but early days.
Look, he fought everyone. He fought everyone at their best. When they do that, how can you say anything derogatory about them? He was an out-and-out champion. And the thing is, let's be quite honest, Jeff said it, when he came back from America, he had 1,000 requests, and it's hard to find the eye of the tiger sometimes. You don't get up 5 in. De La Hoya started to party and find other ways in life. The party, Tassie knows what I'm talking about. So you're a married man, and we're single. Yeah. So he got on the party scene, and 5 in means you get home 5 in, not you get up 5 in. And that really hampers your performance.
I'm going to tell you a quote, boys, from the greatest Sugar Ray Robinson. He said, "It's hard to get up and run at 5 a.m. in the morning when you sleep in silk pajamas."
Yeah, no, spot on. I just thought it was a little bit unfair, like you said, to judge him on the close losses. But as I said, he had the close wins because he had a few close losses. And I think the main thing is, Pete, you just said that I think what defines a truly great fighter is the fact that they fought every single person or fighter available in the generation. Maybe Costa Zoo might have been the one that maybe got away. It's the only fighter he didn't fight, but you win some, you lose some. But I think those types of fighters, like a Sugar Ray Robinson, not to say De La Hoya was Sugar Ray Robinson, but he won a lot, obviously, but he lost a few, but he fought everyone. And I think and Sugar Ray Leonard's the same. Duran, I think you get judged on
Hearns.
Yeah, the whole portfolio. And you look at someone like Duran, and he lost a lot of fights, but he's probably in everyone's top 5 of all time.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
that's
for
right.
sure.
That's
Well said.
So anyway, we're going to get on to this week's fight, and I think, Tassie, it was on you, and this is probably not one for, I suppose we'll call it the new age fans. This is truly one for the boxing purists. Who have you got?
2 of the greatest Mexicans of all time, and probably the 2 greatest bantamweights of all time, 1 and 2, Ruben Olivarez versus Carlos ZARATE. So they're 2 of the greatest Mexicans of all time. But arguably, there's a discussion who's the best bantamweight of all time between these guys. So they both were just absolute legends at bantamweight, and I think they're both hard punchers. Both went on big winning streaks. I think ZARATE at one stage, I think he went on 20 fights in a row knockout streaks twice.
Yeah.
And Olivares, I think, won his first 51 fight. So this is a battle of the 2 legends.
Yeah, you're right. And Peter, it's one of those fights that probably could have almost happened because there wasn't that many years between the guys, was there? I went right over their box records in the bit of research for this episode, and they were pretty stiff not to actually cross paths at some stage.
Yeah, both of them have fought Australian fighters in Lionel Rose and Paul Ferrari, so there's a bit of connection there to Australia. Look, both just great fighters. That would have been a terrific matchup. It would have been a hard one to pick.
Yeah.
It just would have been a real stinking one to pick. I would have hated to have had a bet on that one.
Well, you can see here, Tassie, I've taken the liberty of making it 15 rounds, of course, because this was in the era of when real champions fought 15 rounds. Now, I've made it at Azteca Stadium in Mexico City, Mexico. And the reason I put it there, I mean, that's an iconic stadium. It's obviously where there was a lot of fights. Most recently was probably the Julio Cesar Chavez, Greg Haugen fight. Well, I think there was over 100,000 people there. Just amazing.
Yeah.
Before Chavez come along, Olivares was regarded as the best Mexican of all time before, Chavez come along.
Yeah. And obviously now...
ZARATE was a beast of a puncher. Went up and fought the great Wilfred Gomez. Both undefeated, both all by knockout, and that was a war. Just really tough one, this one. Really tough one.
Yeah, well, Pete, I'll put the record up of Carlos ZARATE first. He finished with a record of 66-4 with 63 KOs, which is just amazing. And I think he had a couple of his losses when he was in the second phase of his career in the late 80s. You can see there, he only won the one title at one weight, which is the WBC bantamweight title in 1976. 9 successful title defences. I think we covered a couple of weeks ago when he fought Paul Ferrari that was actually his first defence. He was a Ring Fighter of the Year in 1977 and the Ring Greatest, or voted the greatest bantamweight of all time by the Ring magazine in 1994. There's a couple of his notable fights there. He had the 9th round knockout of Rodolfo Martinez back in 76 to win the title. You can see there he beat Australia's Paul Ferrari back in 76. Had the epic war with Wilfredo Gomez in 78. Lost a very close decision to Lupe Pintor in 79. When he came back, he lost the technical decision to Jeff Fennick when Jeff sustained the cut under the eye and then retired after losing in 10 rounds to Daniel Zaragoza in 1988. Both of those fights against Fennick and Zaragoza WBC Super Bantamweight title. And you can see there the 1994 International Boxer Hall of Fame inductee. So, Pete, it's interesting there that probably only had the 6 biggest fights of his career. Unusual, well, surprisingly, 4 of them were actually losses.
Yeah, but they sort of came at different ends of his career. I mean, when in 76, 77, when he was just starting to really tear into him, he was hard to beat, wasn't he? And he had those long arms. He could punch hard with both hands, and he would have been terribly hard to beat back in those days, because he didn't have like outstanding explosive bang knockout. He just had those heavy clubbing hands, and they're the worst because he's punching 8, 9 out of 10 every punch. He's just relentless with those punches. Where you get some fighters, they might punch 6 or 7 and they go bang 10, home run, you're out. This guy's just 8, 9 all the time, and sometimes 10, and he's just. He just would have been a nightmare with those long arms and the heavy hands.
And the thing is too, Tassie, with him, what you see with all these fights, he always takes centre ring. And if you've ever fought or even sparred against someone that's tall and has the reach and range and height and everything else, and they take centre ring, it makes it for a very, very tough night.
Of course, look, good fighters control the centre ring. You know, they keep that, they hold that. I teach my fighters to try and hold the centre ring, and you know, exactly right. The thing about ZARATE, like he went up to try and win the super bantamweight title against Gomez. It was a great legend, Puerto Rican, one of the greatest all times. I think a 3 division weight champion. Yeah. He lost, in a massive, war. He went back down to bantamweight though, where he still made defences, so he still was bantamweight champion, even though he got beat at super bantam. Went back and made some defences. Funny enough, though, he retired for 5 years, and then came back. So he went away. And then that's a fair while away. Then he came back and obviously had a few more fights. So but yeah, he was a very vicious puncher, good body puncher, typical Mexican, and as I said, he gives anyone a hard night at bantamweight.
Yeah, he does. And Pete, we talked about his strengths there, but if you look at him, he never really did anything that great, but he just had that presence, and end of the day, he could punch like a mule.
Yeah, and that you mentioned, Lyndon, that he was an imposing figure. He took centre ring, he had those long arms, heavy-handed, punch roll to the body into the head. It just would have been a nightmare to be in front of, because moving forward onto him into those punches, you would definitely have to have pretty good body resistance and a good chin.
Yeah, and Tassie, before we get on to Ruben Olivarez, be interesting. You actually can see here, I don't know what is going on in this clip here.
What's going on there?
Just jumps in the ring. At least he's not streaking. That's the main thing. This is before the fan man days, I suppose. He jumps in there just to say, how you going?
Looks like a wrestling guy.
Yeah, is it?
Gee, he's got the Harry High shorts as well, hasn't he? He should be arrested for wearing those shorts.
So I don't know. I think he's lucky that Carlos ZARATE didn't turn around and give him a good old left hook to the head, to be honest. But it's truly bizarre.
He might have had a bet on the other bloke, Troy, and tried to get a no contest.
Yeah,
I've thought about doing that myself a couple of times.
Just amazing. But we had Carlos ZARATE on a few weeks ago in the classic fight against Paul Ferrari, and I think we discussed how great it would have been to fight Jeff Fenech at that weight. We know they fought in 1987 at super bantamweight, but how good a fight would that have been? Fenech versus ZARATE in the prime would have been unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a discussion. Like I said, Jeff, the other day, I mean, he didn't have that many fights at bantamweight defences, but I think Jeff at bantamweight, almost unbeatable.
Yeah.
And he's there with ZARATE. He's there with Olivarez. Obviously, the great Ramirez has to be mentioned as well. But at bantamweight, these guys, are really the pick of the bunch.
Yeah.
Either these two tonight or Jeff Fenech, in my opinion, the biggest bantamweight. Jeff was so big as a bantamweight too.
Yeah.
But it would have been interesting. Would have been great to see him. It was right in his prime. And
you can see there, that's the Paul Ferrari.
And while we're at it, I don't want to get off these two, but 2 divisions up at featherweight, the great Salvador Sanchez. So Mexicans are always mentioned in the lower weights as some of the best ever. Ricardo Lopez is a light flyweight. It's just a great boxing nation. You know, Marquez, Barrera, Morales. It's just unbelievable around anywhere from bantamweight to sort of lightweight. Chavez, they're the best there is.
Yep. 100%, mate. Pete, let's get on to his opponent, Ruben Olivarez. And we all know, obviously, Olivarez from his 5th round knockout of Lionel Rose back in 1969 to take Lionel's WBC and WBA bantamweight title. You can see there, that's the fights. WBC, WBA, the titles up the top there. He also won the WBA featherweight title in 1974 and the WBC featherweight title in 1975. You can see his biggest wins there. As I said, the 5th round knockout of Lionel in 69. Also beat the great British fighter Alan Rudkin in 69. Had the 3 epic fights with Bobby Chacon. 2 wins and a loss there. Excuse me. Had another epic fight against Alexis Arguello in 1974 when he lost his WBA featherweight title. I've put in there the fight against Jose Luis Ramirez. Now, he's another very underrated Mexican. We all know that he beat Pernell Whitaker in his first loss.
Great fighter. Great fighter.
Yep.
Great fighter.
It was a non-title fight back in 1978 before Ramirez actually won the title. So a bit underrated, that one.
That's a massive win. That's a massive win.
Especially a 2nd round KO. And then you can see there he lost his featherweight title again to Eusebio Pedrosa in 1979. 1991 inducted into the International Hall of Fame. So Pete, you obviously were seeing the fight with Lionel Rose. That was probably the start of something great, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. He was one of those fighters back then. I think before Chavez, he was touted as the best Mexican fighter of all time, and rightly so. He was dynamite. He had everything you wanted in a fighter, and back then it was only the WBC and WBA as well. So you had to fight everyone, and he did, and he used to beat everyone. And the fact that he's moved up to featherweight, won world titles there as well, that's a massive effort for mine. That just gives you a feather in your cap. A lot of the fighters were reluctant to move up in division back in the old days. They'd rather stick to their own division. Very rarely would they move up. So he moved up. He's a 2-division champion. And back then there was no super bantamweight, so he would have been a 3-division if there was.
Good point.
So, he's everything you want in a fighter. And just look at the precision, the way he... he's a matador. He's just made to be a fighter. Everything he does, I was a massive rat for Ruben Olivarez. He was one of my favourites as a kid growing up.
Yeah. And Tassie, I didn't actually mention his record there before, but 89 wins, 13 losses. A lot of those came later in his career. 3 draws, 79 KOs. So between the two of them, they've got 145 knockouts. Unbelievable records.
That's why I picked this fight. You got 2 Mexicans. They're 2 of the greatest bantamweights of all time, either 1 or 2. And they've got massive knockout power. That's why I picked this fight. This has been a fight of mine for a long time. Well before this show, in my own dream fight, this was one of my fights. Just a name you miss off the list, Lyndon, when it comes to the most memorable wins. Chuchu Costello. They fought 3 times. Olivares won 2, Costello won 1. That trilogy should have been mentioned. That's one of definitely his biggest opponents, was Chuchu Castillo as well.
Yeah.
He fought Arguello later. He was older then. Arguello was in his prime. But a great point, Lyndon, about beating Ramirez. Ramirez got a win over Whitaker, controversially.
Yeah. And Edward Azario as well.
Yep. And he had a good fight with Chavez. They were sparring partners.
Yep.
That was touch and go. I think he might have fought Floyd. I think he fought Roger Mayweather, I think, as well.
Yeah.
Ramirez is a very, Macho. Very good fighter. Another great Mexican. What a country. What a absolute country of fighters they are.
Yeah. And it's amazing, Pete, because you don't actually see many great Mexican amateurs. Now, I'm assuming because, obviously, with the conditions over there, poverty's rife over there. So I can imagine if you're any good, you turn pro, as obviously Canelo did at 14. But it's amazing. And do you think that the style has a lot to do with it too? I mean, they seem to be those types of guys that wear you down rather than that explosiveness that you need as an amateur.
No, I mean, you've been to Mexico. Have you been to Mexico, Tassie, Lyndon?
Yep.
I've been to Mexico.
I've been to Mexico, and you know why they don't turn pro, because why they don't stay amateurs. Okay, no, I've been around Mexico, and it's a poverty. If you've got dukes, you've got to make some money for the family. Yeah. Trophies don't pay the bills, so there's no, they don't care about their record. Once they first start, they're doing it to make money for their family, and then it slowly builds up. So they don't get a chance to get sponsors and things like that to get an amateur career. So,
and I think
there's been a couple lately. I think Ramirez and Oscar Valdez both went to the Olympics in recent years from Mexico. Okay. But traditionally, obviously not. They want to make money 15, 16 years old. Chavez, Canelo, all started young, And
I think too, with the way, and anyone watching has been over to the States or even Mexico to watch the fights over there, they treat boxing like we do football here. It's a mainstream sport. They have little tackers that have all the, they've got the Canelo the headbands on, and they go to the fights, and it's a mainstream sport. And I've got a feeling the culture over there, amateurs is probably not seen as, I suppose, the manliest part of boxing, and it's all about being a warrior and almost fighting to the death sort of thing. It's just a bit of a different outlook over there, the way they view boxing, I think, to we do here. But either way, there's some of the best fans in the world, and Taz, this is a great fight to pick, because you can just imagine Azteca Stadium back, in the early 70s, late 70s, whatever the hell it would have been. But you can imagine the crowd roll. It would have had 100,000 there, no problems.
100%, Lyndon, and that's why I also want to educate these people
120.
That watch this show. People that watch this show, and a shout out to everyone that supports us. It's not all about guys in the last few years or recent fighters. I want to teach these people that you got to these two guys from out tonight are legends of the game, and they might not be as high profile as a Ray Leonard or a Hearns or Duran or a Chavez, but if you know boxing like we do, Ruben Olivarez and Carlos ZARATE are two of the greatest. So
true dream
for
fight.
Those that don't know these guys, do your research as well. Look them up. Watch some fights. We're talking just absolute legends of our sport, and that's why I wanted to really showcase this fight tonight, because this is a realistic fight too. It's a dream fight, but as you said, Lyndon, they just missed each other. There's no argument about the weight. They're both bantamweight, obviously, and they're both Mexican legends. So it's really a 50-50 fight.
Well, as I said at the start, Pete, that this is probably not a fight for those ones that have only been following it for 10, 15, even 20 years. This is something that's for the true boxing purists, that are true students of the game. And I'm actually a little bit upset that Mike Altamura's not here to actually be part of this, because this is probably a fight right up his alley.
It would have been good.
Yeah, but Pete, do you agree that this is a fight? If you haven't watched it, get on YouTube and watch these guys in action and judge for yourself who would have won.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I love getting on YouTube and watching all the old fighters, because, as boxing improved since the 50s and 60s, it hasn't. Other sports, you watch other sports. If I watch a 1950, 1970 grand final, you just go, this is a joke. Today's team have beaten by 100 points. Yep. You could see that a mile away. You watch a fight in 1970, watch Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. Now, would Muhammad Ali have any issues with Tyson Fury? No. Fighting, they were tougher in those days. They had less choices. I had the interview with Teddy Atlas. He was blunt. He goes, don't kid yourself. Don't worry about diet. Don't worry about anything. They had no choices. He said, Sammy Sadler fought with one eye one time. And after the fight, he said, legend. I lost. And they said, but you've only got one eye. And he said, don't make excuses for me. I lost. That was their attitude.
Yeah. And these days, they'd be on the social media and they'd be making all the excuses and under the sun and how bad they had it. And
they were dehydrated.
And also too, Peter, great point, Peter. And also too, these days, they're all got the strength conditioning, all that stuff, but they still get tired. Like Jeff Fennick is very much against all that stuff. He believes in the old style of training, your road work, your bag work, your sparring. They get fight condition. They get tired these days more, and they're doing all this strength condition, all this stuff,
and fight less.
I've done a bit of it. It's good sort of hard, heavy, fast cardio. But the thing is, they're getting tired now where these guys fought 15 rounds and they wouldn't get tired. Henry Armstrong would just keep throwing punches, fighting Harada. So they say today's, things are a bit more technical and we've got more sports science, but it doesn't. These guys are getting tired after a few rounds. So it's not better. Like you said, Peter, it's not as good now as back in the old days.
We've met all the old fighters. You've met Roberto Duran fighting Harada. You see them now, 70-year-old men. You still wouldn't even fight them now. I remember when I met Hadara, fighting Hadara, and you're talking to him, and he was hitting the chair. I said, would you still like to fight now? And he was hitting the chair. I mean, these guys were born fighters. They were hard as nails. They fight 15 rounds. They didn't care.
Yeah.
It was a different era, different people.
Well, take me
and
back.
They'd fight more regularly. They'd fight more often as well, Peter. These guys were fighting
in
regularly.
World War I, people were forging their birth certificates to go to war.
Yeah.
They were forging. They were 16-year-olds saying or 18 to jump on a boat to go and fight another side. It was just amazing. Yeah. Well, now we get COVID. Someone sneezes, we jump under the table. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, but the way it's gone now, there's not much difference between males and females.
Let's not go there,
They all look the
let's
same.
move on from that. We don't want to. We're on the boxing night, but I agree.
Tassie, you've never clapped for me once in this entire show, and you're not softening me up for the quizzes either. I'm still.
Yeah, look,
I know you won the last. I know I've been out of form.
Yeah, look, I'll just chime in there. And I think that I agree. I think these days they're more about the athletes and the businessmen, and I would 100% say take me back to the 70s and 80s, even 90s, when these boxers, that's all they were. They were fighters, they were warriors, and it was more so than, negotiating a contract and for all this. I know it's all about the cash and all that sort of stuff, but back then it was about pride, it was about legacy, it was about reputation, it was about the fans, and these days they could not give a shit about any of that. It's about coin and that's
TikTok.
it. So
TikToker.
Yeah. So take me back to TikTok. The days before TikTok.
Yeah. One second though. No. Peter, are you suggesting that most blokes these days have a mangina?
No, what I'm trying to say is, look, even if you go to the football, you see a footballer now gets a light tap, the doctor's out, he's got a 20-minute break. In the old days, he's knocked out cold. 5 minutes later, they're back on the ground. They're playing. Yeah. They get handled. They might not remember. It was different times. That's all I'm saying.
It was.
I worked at Carlton for a year as a boxing coach, and I loved it there, and they were all good guys. But I've always said the only thing they were missing down there, and I'm sure like all AFL clubs, was the rose pedal bearer that threw the pedals out as they walk. Because that's all they were missing. Because they, like you said, they.
What year was that, Lyndon?
Sorry,
what
mate?
year was that?
That was 2008. So it was the year of Chris Judd's
Where'd
first
they
year.
finish? Where'd they finish on the ladder?
I think they just missed the finals that year. But look, some great athletes, don't get me wrong. But, if they sneeze, they had 6 blokes there with tissues and, everything else. So
yeah,
that's AFL class. But anyway, we're talking about boxing. Let's get on to the main thing. Tassie, you can go first. Who wins and why in a very, very tough one?
Yeah, look, it's a very tough fight. ZARATE just a vicious puncher, and he obviously dominated in the 9 defences, and he went up and fought the great. And do yourself a favour, guys. If you don't know who Wilfredo Gomez is, check him out as well. He was a monster, mate. He fought the great Salvador Sanchez, Azuma Nelson. So look, I've got to go with Ruben Olivarez on points. I think that the guys that he fought some, Castillo, Rose, win over Ramirez, losing to Aguayo when Aguayo was young, up and coming. So that wasn't a great loss. Wins over Bobby Chacon. The fact he went up to featherweight and won the belt there. Only had losses really when he was past his best. Great fight. Both guys have probably had their moments, and ZARATE would, probably sting Olivarez, once or twice. But I've got to go with Ruben Olivarez. Unanimous points decision over 15 rounds.
In a tough fight. How about you, Pete?
I see this fight starting really fast, and ZARATE obviously trying to get center ring and push Olivarez back and landing body shots. But I'm imagining Olivarez countering and really starting to hurt ZARATE and taking a bit of the ring off him. And then I think for 3 or 4 rounds, there'd be some heated exchanges where the fight would be seesawing. But by about the 8th or 9th round, I think Olivarez, for mine, just had that touch more finesse and class at that type of thing. And I just seen the last 3 or 4 rounds edging out a very, very close decision to win a unanimous decision over the legend Carlos ZARATE. Just been a bit too smart at the end.
Yeah. Well, as usual, I'm going to go against the grain there. You always knew it was going to come. Look, a really, really hard one to split. And yeah, it's just, I can just see, obviously, 2 great Mexican warriors, neither one of them wanting to take a backward step. You can obviously see ZARATE, centre ring, standing tall, ripping, hooking, uppercuts, all the rest of it. Alvarez just doing what he does. Probably had a few more strings to his bow than ZARATE, but I just think the strength and the power and the relentlessness of ZARATE would be enough to wear Olivarez down. I'm actually picking him to stop Olivarez in about the 10th round. And I just think, I just think he would gradually get on top. And don't forget, I know a lot of them come late in his career, but Olivarez was actually stopped 9 times, so he could be stopped. But look, it would have been an absolute war. It doesn't matter really who won. I think the fans and the sport would have won it in the end. And I think we could probably come up with about 50 different possibilities. I don't disagree with either of you guys. I think it could quite easily go that way. But the way I picture it, I just think ZARATE, would just be a little bit too strong. Even though it was a bantamweight, I think he'd be a little bit too big and strong for Olivarez.
Mate, there's good arguments for both. I mean, as I said, like, it's just a great fight. It's good to have a different point of view like yours, and either or, mate. Look, it's a great discussion, and I can see how there's an argument for both guys. Definitely.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for this one. We're going to do something a little bit different. I can't remember who was next. I'm not sure it was you. I think it might have been you, Pete. We're going to do you the week after because, as I said last week, we're going to take this week to do a request, if I can spit that out. Now, I think it's Nick on Instagram messaged me about this. Now, initially, I think I said he wanted Costa Tszyu versus Arturo Gatti. I think we both decided that, hey, it'd be a great, entertaining fight, but I don't think Arturo Gatti actually stood a chance against Tszyu or Costa. I think Tszyu would chop him down in about 6 or 7 rounds. So, look, it's a great matchup, Nick, and I think it'd be great, and I'm sure they would put on a show. But he sent through another one a little bit before that I think is a little bit more competitive, and it's actually Canelo Alvarez against Thomas Hearns. I think that's a great fight. I think we do it at super welterweight or junior middleweight. I think the Thomas Hearns, when he beat...
super welter.
I think the Thomas Hearns that beat Roberto Duran was at his peak, and I think Canelo obviously
that's the way. And he beat Wilfred Benitez as well.
Yeah, he did. And I think... And Canelo also had some really good wins at that weight as well before he went up to middleweight and super middleweight and light heavyweight and where else he's been. So
Edison Lara, Austin Trout.
Yep.
Yeah,
he had some good wins. So Yep.
No, I was going to say, who do we pick for classic fights? Because we never picked one after we interviewed Jeff.
We'll have to get back to... I think it was actually up to... I think Tazzy, it must be up to you, Pete, I'd say. No, you had ZARATE and Ferrari the week before that, didn't you?
Yeah,
it's
Tazzy's classic fight.
So I'm going to go, even though that's another segment, I'm going to go classic fight. I was just reading about this today because it actually happened this week. Mike Tyson, Buster Douglas, 1990. We're going to go back over and review that fight because what a truly memorable fight that was. So Tyson, Douglas. More a memorable fight rather than a classic fight, but I think... we'll throw that in the mix. As I said, it was the 31st or 32nd, I think it was, year anniversary of that fight. So we'll go back over that and relive what was a truly, probably the biggest upset in boxing history. So
and a great fight as well. A great fight.
All right, Tazzy. So that's it for this week.
Yep.
So as I said, next week Canelo Alvarez versus Thomas Hearns. We're going to make it at Caesars Palace, Las Vegas, over 12 rounds for the World Super Welterweight title. So look out for that one. Thanks again for joining us for this episode, and we'll see you next week.
See you later.